Fungi can also cause a variety of different types of rots, and typically when we're talking about rots, we modify the word rot by telling you what part of the plant is rotting. In this particular slide, what you're looking at is what's called a crown rot. That's because the infection by the fungus that's involved here has occurred in the part of the plant that's near the soil line, that is the crown of the plant. And as you can see, there's this kind of mass destruction of this particular plant, which is a hosta. This specific disease is something called southern blight. It's one of the nastier of the fungal diseases. Quite frankly, it's about the most aggressive fungal disease that I really encounter on a regular basis. And this particular fungus, it's called Sclerosium Rolsi, I love the name of that fungus, is typically more of a tropical or subtropical pathogen. We used not to see it a lot here in Wisconsin. Our typical, very cold, what I consider classic Wisconsin winters kept this particular pathogen under check. Unfortunately, as our climate has warmed a bit and we've had milder winters, this particular fungus is able to survive here in the state much more so than it used to be able to. This is actually a relatively easy disease to identify if you can look for the right things. You can see a white arrow in this particular picture, and it's pointing to a whole bunch of little tiny spherical tan structures that are clinging to one of the petioles on the leaves. And you can see a lot of these if you look in that crown tissue. These little round structures are what are called sclerotia. They are a resting structure of this particular fungus, and they help the fungus survive during adverse weather conditions. What they are is basically a whole bunch of fungal hyphae packed very tightly together with a little colored rind. And they can range in color from kind of a tannish color to kind of a reddish color. And they're about the size of an osmocote pellet or some types of very small seeds. And this particular organism produces lots and lots of them. The first time I ever encountered southern blight was in the Allen Centennial Gardens at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, just very close to where I work on campus. They had a flower bed in front of the garden that was just decimated by something, and they called me over. By the time I got over there to do a diagnosis, they'd lost about 40 square foot of plant material in this bed. That's how aggressive this particular pathogen is. And when I started looking at all of these dead plants, I kind of moved away the tops of the plants and looked down towards the base. There were these sclerotia everywhere. They were covering the base of the stems. They were all over the mulch that they had around these plants, and it was just a mass of sclerotia everywhere. The other thing that you can also see a little bit in this particular photo is a little bit of whitish material. Those are masses of fungal hyphae that are produced by this particular fungus, and that's the other thing that you can look for to identify southern blight. So a combination of a lot of dead plants dying very rapidly, these sclerotia, and a little bit of hyphal growth from the fungus. This is a very difficult disease to manage. What I typically tell folks when they see this is that what they need to do is kind of delimit where they see the infected areas. So watch around the plants on the mulch and look for sclerotia. Find the edge of where the sclerotia are forming. Go out about 1 foot to 2 feet beyond that. And from that outer edge back towards the center, start to remove and dig up plants and bag them in garbage bags in place, and then remove those plants wholesale from the garden. I also tell them to take about 1 inch of the topsoil. And this is one of the few diseases where I actually tell folks, if you have this, once you've removed all this plant material, come back in and definitely use fungicide treatments, because you really need to try to keep this disease under check. And quite frankly, you will probably, even if you do all of this, continue to have problems with this disease for a while, because it's very easy to pick up those sclerotia on shoes, on tools, on, say, the wheel of your wheelbarrow, and then you can move the fungus from area to area in your garden. In general, it's always important as you're moving around in your garden to routinely decontaminate your tools, your shoes, anything that comes into contact with potentially contaminated either plant material or soil. And again, for metal objects, you can use 70% alcohol. For things like shoes, you could use something like 10% bleach.